I'm Jeff Mucklin with the Nurture Nature Center, and this is Science at Home. Who hasn't marveled at birds in flight? Some of our oldest stories and legends show that humans have dreamed of being able to fly. The story of Icarus revolves around wings made of wax and feathers that worked wonderfully until you got too close to the sun. Or how about the flying carpet in Arabian Nights? Without modern technology, the only way that ancient people could imagine being able to fly was through the use of magic or by replicating how birds do it. Many ancient philosophers studied birds in flight. Leonardo da Vinci in 1505 wrote a series of papers describing birds in flight and how they achieved this. It talks about the force of gravity and air pressure acting on birds in flight, and he even describes how to build flying machines. And he provides detailed sketches of these machines. One of the machines he describes is a kind of flying machine that flaps its wings. These are called ornithopters. And another device that he invented was the aerial screw, which is sort of like a helicopter. He imagined that several people could turn this machine fast enough to achieve flight. And although it's quite ingenious, no matter how fast I turn this, it's not going to work. This machine is not able to fly. Leonardo da Vinci may not have been able to figure out how to fly, but over 2,000 years ago, people in China were able to produce these small hot air balloons, these Chinese lanterns, as they're called. The way the lantern works is it's a paper sack, and we heat the air inside of this paper sack by burning a fuel source of some kind. As the fuel burns, the air inside of the sack becomes hot, and this heated air becomes less dense than the air around it, and that makes this sack buoyant. And it eventually, if it's hot enough, it begins to float. It begins to rise. Now they didn't make them, there it goes. They didn't make them large enough to, for people to ride in them, but they did use them as a form of military signaling. They would light these, and a certain number of them would, convey a certain kind of message. It wasn't until 1783 that hot air balloons large enough to carry a person were invented in France. On October 15th of 1783, the first tethered flight with a person on board took off from Paris. Just a few weeks later, on December 1st of that same year, the first manned hydrogen gas balloon flew again from Paris, France. Gas balloons do not need to be heated like hot air balloons. They are buoyant, they fly, because they are filled with a gas that is lighter than air. That first balloon had hydrogen gas in it, and later we found that we could use helium gas to do the same thing. Helium gas is now the preferred gas for filling things like these party balloons. If you've ever, seen a balloon floating, it was probably filled with helium gas, which is interesting because helium gas is much rarer than hydrogen gas, which means it's more expensive, and it's not as effective as a lifting gas. It's not as buoyant as hydrogen gas, but it is inert. It is a very safe gas. It's not poisonous, and it's not flammable, which means if I, say, pop this balloon with a flame, nothing happens. Hydrogen gas is flammable, so if I pop this balloon with a flame, the result is quite spectacular. So ballooning is fun, I'm sure, but blimps and zeppelins are not a widely used form of transportation. With the catastrophe of the Hindenburg, the era of hydrogen-powered zeppelins came to a screeching halt. And, these days, many people may be familiar with the Goodyear blimp, but it's not a widely used form of transportation. The same goes for hot air balloons. It's a wonderful hobby, but it's a little more than that. But the history of flight changed forever in 1903 when the Wright brothers flew the first heavier-than-air aircraft. I'm at Braden Air Park, just a little north of downtown Easton, and the airplanes that you'll find here show how much aviation, how much this technology has progressed in the last 100 years since aircraft were first invented. The airplanes behind me do not fly by using flapping wings of some kind or by using lighter than air gases. Instead, they fly by generating lift with an aerofoil, which is a surface that is curved over the top and flat on the bottom. And as this curved surface moves forward, it generates a region of low pressure on the top of the wing, and that's what makes a modern airplane fly. That's how they get lift. Airplanes like the ones behind me are significantly faster than dirigibles or blimps or hot air balloons, and certainly unlike hot air balloons, these can be steered. You can guide the motion of an airplane by using control surfaces on the wing or on the tail of the airplane. And you can control how fast you're going by controlling the thrust. These airplanes get thrust through a propeller, and larger jets that many of you have flown on use jet engines to provide the significant thrust that they need to lift their heavy bodies and cargo to the sky. Statistically speaking, airplanes are the safest way to travel. They're also the fastest way to travel long distances anywhere in the world. And for these reasons, they're very popular. On any given day, there are about 87,000 planes in the skies over the United States alone. Now, all of these aircraft produce a significant amount of air pollution. Globally, the aviation sector accounts for about 2% of global emissions of carbon dioxide, for example. Now, that motorized parasail isn't producing all that much pollution, but if you just take one flight from New York to London, the emissions from that one flight are larger than the yearly emissions that some people produce in other countries around the world. Aircraft engines are a major source of noise pollution. This one's just taxiing off of the runway, but during takeoff, a jet engine can produce sounds in excess of 140 decibels. While airborne, the main source of noise is the engines and the high-speed turbulence over the body of the airplane. And there are health consequences to this elevated sound. It can cause hypertension, heart disease, and just basic annoyance and sleep loss. Flying cars are another technology that has been promised for decades. I don't know if or when that will ever happen, but there are companies that are providing proposals and have made actually flying examples of small aircraft that they say will be affordable for almost anyone and that will make it possible to fly from point A to point B. But in many ways, the future is already here. I'm specifically referring to drones. These kinds of small radio-controlled or in some cases self-guided aircraft. They've been used for imaging objects from the air much more cheaply than, say, chartering a helicopter or an airplane. Farmers use them, surveyors use them, park rangers use them. They're used in firefighting in some cases. They're used in search and rescue. Anywhere where you need a small aircraft or anywhere where you're going to be flying in a perhaps dangerous environment. Rather than sending a person in an airplane, you can send one of these small drones. They've also been proposed as a way to deliver cargo, again, in urban environments, alleviating traffic on roads. So here's a fun at-home activity that you can do. You can make paper airplanes. I'm sure many of you have done this before, but the most common type that people make are these basic darts, and these fly pretty well. They're easy to make, but there are a lot of other designs that you can try out that have different features. I made another one that's called the Buzz, and I also made this one here that's called a Zip Dart. We will share a link that will allow you to make your own paper gliders, and after you've made them, try throwing them and seeing which ones go the furthest. Record your results and maybe share them in the comments. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time.